Okay, so we are at 7:05, and I did hear from a couple of folks that they weren't able to make it, and a couple more might join us, but I think since we have a quorum and it's 5 after, we should get started. And I'm going to call the meeting to order at 7:05 and ask Liz if she would be our minute taker. And we'll just, I don't think anybody else is here other than our regular crew. So I'm going to assume there isn't any public comment that we might cover during the course of the meeting. We do need to, oh, here comes Patrick. We do need to approve our minutes from July 14th. So if I could get one of the board members to move to do that, that would be great.
So moved.
Okay,
Andrew.
so
Rob
Andrew
seconds.
made the motion and Rob is seconding. Okay. Hey, Patrick, I think you're with us. We're just getting started, so take your time settling in. Okay. Sure, thank you. Good, yes. Confirming my dinner delivery. Okay, so I wanted to start by recapping the school community roundtable. And I had a few things to share about that, and then just love to get the feedback of people that were there. So I think there were, and Don and Patrick can confirm for me, about a dozen people in the audience, but not that many that were not involved in our community. We had many more people participating on Zoom. So sorry, a dozen in person, many more participating on Zoom, similar to the Bristol policing conversation last night. So we had about 40 participants on Zoom representing all of our 5 towns in lots of different capacities, which was great. We sent out, and you should have seen a spreadsheet that was listing the groups of topics that people might be interested in talking about further, and gave folks the opportunity to indicate whether they'd like to be part of future conversations, and then also whether they wanted to or were open to taking the lead on convening any of those conversations. And my thinking was that although we are going to really take a step back at this point as a committee, that it might be helpful to send out a nudge in a week or so. Well, so first let me back up. I sent that action spreadsheet and the notes from the meeting to the people who were invited, so including people who didn't attend. But Sue had made the suggestion that maybe we also send it to our list of community engagement folks that we've touched over the course of primarily last fall. So I thought that was a good suggestion as a way to let folks know what different things are going on right now, and see if there were other people that from that broader group that might be interested in being part of these conversations as well. So I hope to send that same follow-up email to that larger group before this week is out. And then a nudge maybe in a week or so to say, hey, curious to see if anyone has decided to convene a group, and if so, you know, or sort of check in what's happening now. So kind of a light touch and then step back. We did get some feedback from folks. We got some positive feedback. Thanks for starting the conversations. We got some feedback that was more constructive around the amount of time it took to go through all of the introductions and the sharing about the personal experience around the pandemic versus really digging into specific action items. And that's really useful. I think, you know, we try to balance the opportunity to have dialogue and get people comfortable in speaking with one another with the desire to really brainstorm around concrete ideas. So I think that's good feedback for us to keep in mind for future events. And just navigating, you know, introductions of 40 people over Zoom is tricky. Although for me personally, I don't know if anybody else felt that way, I thought it was valuable to just really, it really made me appreciate all of the different people there representing so many aspects of our community, many of whom I had not seen before or you know, didn't have the name and the face connection. So that's a little bit about what I wanted to share about it, but I'd really like to just take a few minutes actually, to hear, for those of you that were there, what you thought, how you thought it went. And just feel free to unmute yourself and jump in.
Okay, I'll go ahead. I felt it was really, you know, very inspiring and energizing, and that anyone working on it, like you and Sue and whoever else, really did a great job of pulling it together when it was a little unwieldy with the technology and stuff at first. But I feel like it was such an important coming together of people, and an opening for all kinds of possibilities. So I was thrilled with it.
I'll go. I went into the meeting with grave doubts about how it was going to be, and I thought I was just thrilled as well, to echo Sally. I mean, first of all, that people were there. I really loved here. I mean, I know the introductions took a long time, but it helped everybody see what a breadth of experience was present. And I thought the design was just amazing. You know, that that many people could be divided into small groups, especially when so many of them, you know, the majority of them were attending via Zoom. I was blown away by how well the design worked in terms of getting us to the next steps. And so I just thought it was spectacular. I left very excited and inspired, as Sally said, and to have two facilitators, one for Zoom and one for in-person, and have the in-person facilitator also to some extent facilitating the Zoom part, but we couldn't have done it without Shannon on the Zoom facilitation. I just thought it was amazing, and to be able to go outside and take off our masks, even though we had to be worried about bears, it was just, you know, I thought it was fabulous. Hot, but fabulous.
As an action-oriented person, I sometimes have a hard time with what could be a lack of productivity from a meeting like that. And then when I think about that meeting's purpose was not to solve problems. We weren't intending to solve anything at that meeting. That was creating the conditions where maybe we can work together in different ways to solve problems. And when I think about it that way, I feel like we did accomplish a lot, and from an action-oriented perspective, I think it was really productive from that perspective.
I came away feeling like it was, we had started connections, and everybody could sort of see that as they went off into their rooms or they went outside, and it was just, again, another seed of connections. So I think it was very powerful to see, and I think the people that attended, you know, feel like we can do something, we can help.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Zoom breakout rooms. I thought that was a great opportunity, especially because there's no background noise. I struggle in large meetings when there's background noise and trying to have smaller conversation. So I found that really helpful. I think, I did think the introductions were a little long, but at the same time, like everyone was saying, it allowed people to sort of see who's in the room, who's in the building per se. And I think the piece that I really enjoyed some of the conversations I had in the breakout room, where I saw some light bulbs go off where people made those connections down that you represent, in the fact that like New Haven, Lincoln, we're all really connected when it comes to our school district, and what befalls, New Haven actually also befalls Lincoln in certain regards. And I think people were really putting those pieces together, which is huge for this district as we move forward with our difficult conversations. I think hopefully maybe break down some of those barriers that form at town line, where people get really protective about maybe their town school, but then don't care about the school down the road. But we're all interconnected. So I thought that was an incredible outcome in the conversations I had. I have one more thing. I also think that list, the spreadsheet that you sent out, Krista, is really, really helpful. Just to sort of reframe like what we can do moving forward. And a lot of those, where I think the original conversation for me regarding this group seemed really, really daunting, decade-long process. Some of those action items we can do tomorrow, start doing today. And I think for me, that's really helpful too.
Does anyone else have anything to add? I would just add that I'm really proud of our group for deciding to take this on. I really appreciate, and want to say again, appreciate Patrick and the pressure you feel to take action on so many fronts, and that you still could comfortably sit with this sort of process at this moment. I think it's great that we did this, that the school system brought this group together. I think we should be really proud of that. Regardless of where it goes, there are connections that are built, and our schools are a big part of those connections. So that's a big win. The other thing I was going to say is I'm kind of put on my Kim Callahan hat. If anyone feels inspired to share how they felt to the Addison Independent in a letter to the editor, that would be amazing. It would be great to talk about that in some ways beyond just our group. So, if you feel inspired, that would be great. Okay, so if there isn't anything else on that right now, I wanted to share an update from the Community Action Team, because I think there's some overlap in their work and our work. So just a reminder that when schools were asked to come up with their back to school plan for the fall, I think every district, and Patrick, you can clarify for me if I'm misspeaking, but I think every district was asked to put together some different teams representing the different components of school, so nutrition and transportation and health and wellness and communication. And so I'm representing, or I'm sitting on that team along with Adora Frazier, the principal at Robinson, and Mandy Chesley, and 2 students, and Jennifer, Willie, and we're trying to think about how to ensure that our community, including students and staff, really have a good feel for what back to school is going to look like, and being mindful about that. And I think some of the things we've talked about in this group have helped to inform that work. So for example, this group's talked a lot about reaching out to not just families of kids currently in school, but to the greater community. And so to that end, the communication that's going out about back to school is now going to include all select board members who may or may not have received back to school information before. and yet might be really wondering, or at their very least, many of their constituents might be wondering, even if they don't have kids in school, what is that going to look like? So we thought it would be important to include those folks in that communication moving forward. So I think that's great. We also are going, we had recommended that there be weekly videos. And so Patrick has gotten to really fine tune his video presence and his star power, and doing recorded messages once a week so folks can see our leadership. And he's been doing a great job presenting a really calm presence and explaining the different pieces of what back to school might look like as we know them right now. We
warn
also,
the video editor every week that he has his work cut out for him, making me look good.
oh, you're the editor. Yes, Stowe is amazing, and he and his drone are magical. But you have a really nice presence as well. So
The drone, it's very produced. I was floored, but it's also so very reassuring and great to see. I mean, one of the things that I think must be hard, Patrick, is to have to talk about what you're not sure of yet. But I think it's really important for the community to realize that the ground is shifting all the time, and that you're in a position, you and the administrative team and the rest of the staff are in a position where they need to make plans that may need to change. I was talking to Shannon that night about, working. I said, God, working on the schedule must be just so complex. And she said, yes, and we had it pretty much down. And then the governor said school wasn't starting until September 8th. And that changed it just, so those videos have been, I think, really helpful.
has everyone
Out of practice at talking about things that I'm not certain about. So hopefully it's coming across a little better as time goes on.
Yeah. Sally, have you, not having kids in the system, have you had a chance to see any of that yet?
I have seen them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're great. I really like them. I was just thinking, when you said you're getting used to doing it when you're not sure about things, you could be moving into a politician, or something like that.
This is the most political position I aspire to have.
Smart man. Something else that I think first came out in this group and is going to happen around the back to school plan is a town hall. So a little more open-ended conversation, which, I think I recognize takes some bravery on the part of our admin team to be open to on the moment or in the moment questions that we may not have answers to, but not recorded. And I think something else that's come out of our work is the communication with staff and how important that is. And so the staff conversation is happening this Thursday, and the community conversation is happening when we would normally be having our next community engagement meeting. And so I welcome everybody to attend that. And I think we learned a lot at the school community roundtable, and I think we've learned a lot from what the Burlington School District has done as far as how best to have those conversations be really productive, and the technical piece, the logistical piece. So there's going to be kind of a mission control room where people are monitoring chat and looking at questions and moderating the conversation. But it's a really good opportunity for folks to see live and in person our admin team and just ask some of the things that are on their mind. There's also a COVID kind of question and concern email inbox that's been set up for people. So I think a lot of families are probably directing a lot of their questions to principals, but I think that inbox is getting some traffic as well. I don't know if you have any sense of that, Patrick, if it's pretty steady or pretty manageable.
There's not a ton of traffic on there, no.
Mm-hmm.
The system we have set up makes it pretty manageable. Jennifer receives all of those, puts the information into a shared doc, identifies if it's a staff community member, and the admin team is monitoring that and that traffic, and people are responding, and we're recording responses in that same Google Doc, so we know how similar answers have been responded to. So we're kind of all in the loop on that, which I think helps keep communication consistent across different people in different schools.
One question I have about the communication, some of the things you're talking about are news to me, but that's fine. I don't have kids in the school, but I think it's true that you are planning to follow up with families that didn't respond to the survey by phone. And I'm not sure that the question on the written survey about supervision during remote school days was clear. That is, in your video, Patrick, you talked about that was a very important question because you want to make sure that no one becomes unemployed because of the decisions you've made about a hybrid model. And I think that people might have answered that question differently if they'd known that that was your goal. So I'm not sure how to fix that, but I wanted to make sure you knew that.
Yeah, I think there probably isn't a fix to it, but I think we'll be able to take care of it. That was simply trying to gauge what is the relative need of families for, I said supervision intentionally because childcare specifically has a set of licensure requirements, et cetera, around it, and whether we were providing childcare or a safe place for kids to be and supporting them with their remote learning might be different. So that's the reason for the supervision term. But the idea was just to try and get a sense of what's the ballpark, at least in terms of the community need. We just sent out a staff survey to also get a sense from staff, like how many staff members need childcare or supervision so that they can come to work. And pooling those together, can we come up with something that's going to meet the community need? Yeah. And feeling really, really good that we can do that in our buildings with our ELP staff. So tomorrow morning, I shoot my next video from Lincoln Community School, and I'll be talking a little bit more about the plans that are coming together for that. Still not a lot of detail, but a little bit more than last time.
Yeah.
So that's good. And we have 1,001 responses. So that equates to 1,001 students because we asked for one response per student. So it's not the 100% we were going for, but it's a pretty decent response rate.
I wanted to add on the oh, sorry, go ahead, Sally.
No, it was just a kind of a silly thing, just reminding you to bring your rubber boots to Lincoln tomorrow, since we've had so much rain and you're up there in the high country, rivers.
I live in Lincoln, so I've grown accustomed to having my rubber boots with me everywhere I go.
I was going to say that with respect to the surveys, I think it was with this group we talked about how can we, and also as part of our overall community engagement, how can we find opportunities in this back to school communication to take the pulse of how folks are feeling overall. And this first survey was really data driven to make some really specific back to school logistical plans. So it didn't seem like the right time and place to do that. But this community action team is thinking about that. A couple of different things. One is reaching out to students directly, especially 7th through 12th, and then perhaps younger students through their families to get a sense of how are you feeling about coming back to school. Another thing we've talked about is perhaps a few weeks into the school year, getting a sense from people, how's it going? So, being mindful of the need to still try to capture some qualitative, to give folks a chance to really just share how it's going. And the same thing for staff, to provide opportunities, whether it's a survey or principals connecting with their staff more informally, this town hall, ensuring that people have a way to not just answer, I need childcare on this day, but to kind of just share how it's going. So, so that's been talked about, but not yet, an exact plan other than the town hall, which I think does get at some of that need for folks to make connections and to share what their concerns are. I think those are the big things that I wanted to share from that group. I don't know if there's anything else, Patrick, that I missed that you know of as far as communication that would be important to tell people about.
I think that's the gist of it. I think, there's a overall kind of timeline and sort of broad strokes talking points laid out, and kind of working with that, but also adapting it as more information comes out and we have updates and other things. So it's been really helpful to have that sort of longer range plan to build off of as we send out the communication. So it's been, to me, it's been tremendously helpful to have this team of folks with varying perspectives helping to drive the communication and what's shared when and how. So I'm just appreciative to the work that's happening there.
Can I just ask, I don't want to mess up the agenda at all, but are we going to tonight be going back to the spreadsheet of actionable items and talking about what happens with that? And because like Patrick, I'm really interested in action, and I'm wondering what next steps we should take related to that. And maybe I seem to be missing things these days. Could be the 2.5-year-old in my presence that does it to me, but anyway, so I'm just curious about what's going to happen with that spreadsheet and moving forward with, are we going to narrow down to a certain number of things, or is someone going to decide to say, go for it, or how's it supposed to work? So if this isn't the time to talk about that, that's fine, but I hope we get to talk about that tonight.
No, yeah, I think it's fine. We talked about that a little bit at the beginning, and so what I think we'll do is, well, we're trying to strike that balance of letting it percolate now with some community folks taking the lead so that this group doesn't need to take the lead on moving specific items forward, because we have to really focus on our fall engagement work. But giving some nudges to encourage it to happen. And so some next steps are to share that action list out with more folks, the folks that express an interest in community engagement in the fall, but weren't necessarily there because these ideas came from that group. And I think they'd like to know that conversations happened about some of those ideas, and perhaps they want to join in smaller group conversations moving forward. And then I was planning on sending out a note maybe in a week or so to say, hey, if you've expressed an interest in any one of these groups, have you met yet? Are you thinking about meeting? Think about taking some next steps. Go ahead.
So, is it okay to move forward on any of those things that are on the list that we've signed up for?
Absolutely. And if you feel, Nancy, like maybe folks need that permission, then maybe I should send a note sooner rather than later, and I'd be happy to do that. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that might be good to clarify.
The other thing I'm wondering about is, I've signed up with interest in the broadband issue.
Yep.
And through the meeting we had the other night, it became clear to me that there are some issues that are on that list that work in two ways. They're good for kids and for our they're good for meeting the goals of the strategic plan in relation to students. And they're also at the same time helpful in attracting more families to come here. And in any case, I'm interested in one of those particularly, and I'm wondering what, and I'm sure I'm not the only person wondering, who in the school district should I be talking to about that topic as we work on it and discuss and discover things about it, and invite experts in to help us. Who in the school district do we connect with to make sure that we don't work at cross purposes, or if we need information from the school district, how's that supposed to work?
I'm not sure about the working in cross purposes. I wouldn't want to either assume that responsibility myself or delegate that responsibility to somebody else to pay attention to all these different groups and making sure they're not duplicating effort. I don't think, in light of what's ahead of us for the next who knows how many months, that's a practical role for us to take. In terms of seeking information, I think I could be the point person for that, and either I'll have the information or I could direct people to someone that could provide that information. And I think, again, I just want to be mindful of the heavy lift ahead of us and getting school up and running and going smoothly, and that's going to be our focus. And I just hope people can be, understanding as we try to get that going.
So
you had an internet question with 1,000 responses on the survey. 95.8% of our respondents said they have internet that was strong enough to support video streaming or video conferencing, I should say.
Can you say again? I didn't.
Sure. So of those 1,001 responses, 5.8% said that they have strong enough internet connection to function with the video meetings that they're having. The video, not so much streaming, but video conferencing.
You said 95% of the 1,001.
Yep, almost 96%, which was surprising to me. I didn't anticipate it being quite that high. So that was 42 families said they didn't have strong enough internet, or 42 children. Could be fewer families.
I have one question regarding this, and that is, I bumped into someone who would like to be a part of this. They were excited about it, and it's someone from the from Mountain Health, a doctor, and I realized we didn't have any real health care. I don't know how many, maybe we did, but anyway. So how should I get their name on the list that you're going to send out so they get in the ball, get in the mailing?
Yeah, so that actionable spreadsheet is editable. So you can either put their name and contact info right on it, and then that captures it, or you can share it with them and they can do that. That would be great.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I did want to just say to Nancy's question that I remember talking about this a little bit at the beginning of this planning for the community roundtable, or maybe even a little bit before that it is something to discuss how, and probably the full board would be good to have that conversation as well, how best to incorporate work from these groups into, not incorporate into the work of the board, but for the board to be able to hear from them with some, whether it's regularity or just some way to, provide that communication flow. So I know at different times at our board meetings, we've heard from faculty members who are working on personalized learning, or we've had different presentations an energy committee presentation, different presentations from community members and from faculty and from, a host of folks. So I think it would be really important for us to figure out how best to provide a direct opportunity for communication. And, and I guess also to determine who, if on Patrick's team, is the right person to be part of future conversations. I guess that would be your role, Patrick, would be to figure out from all these things percolating, who's the best person to talk to about that. So, as this work gets underway, maybe this group, is a place for some of that conversation to start.
I guess another thing, well, I think my questions probably aren't specific to me. So that maybe that's helpful, Krista, as you think about the communication back to people who've signed up for things on that list. I also, I guess maybe giving a specific example. So the thing that I've put my name on is broadband, and I see that there's one other. At least earlier today, there's still one other person on that list who was there the other night, and which is great. And I have another person from the community who is interested too. So when there are grants available, there are experts in the field in the state. So if we reach out to people who can help us think that through, who do we say we are? I mean, do we say we're a community group that has formed as a result of what keeps them from saying, who the hell are you? You know what I mean? I start to have a bit of a shy attack if I don't have a way to say, we're working on behalf of the board, or we're working on this issue to help the school district, and the superintendent is the person we're communicating. I mean, how do we have enough gravitas to get people's attention? I mean, maybe I'm borrowing trouble here, but do you see what I'm saying?
I just want to say that I think, Nancy, it's your time.
It's my time.
Have so much experience. You are the one.
That's
you
just a
carry
nice
the
way of
baton.
saying I'm a pretty good bullshitter.
You have more credentials than a lot of people do,
Well,
and you have a lot of passion.
but
go for it.
Okay, I'll go for it.
But like in the grant example, say for example, you were like, wow, there's this awesome grant, but it requires you apply with the school district. That would be something that I think, that the admin team would need to decide, okay, is this something we want to pursue? And if so, we're interested in dedicating a little bit of staff time to partner with this group on that. And They might decide, we've looked at that and it doesn't work, or that's a great idea, but not right now, or whatever it is. So it's sort of like I'm kind of picturing that it's like, there's this awesome like people power with you at the helm, Nance, but this like, people power thing, generating a lot of capacity to gather information and share resources. And then there's the need to kind of check in to see what the capacity is and what the challenges or opportunities there might be, and then it moves forward. So yeah. And I don't know, does that jive, Dawn and Patrick, with what you would imagine?
I think for the most part, yes. For me, the trick is, we've had some conversations at this group and maybe others too about, as a school district, we were going to try to launch this, and then it's not something that's owned by the school board or the school district. And the more times for this to be able to move forward that it requires some action on the district's part, it causes question about who actually is owning this and running with it. And I just want to, I don't want to sound like I'm not interested in participating and supporting it the best we can to move it forward, but I'm recognizing what's ahead of us between the fall conversations about budget and years beyond, and the Nasdaq study and facilities, on top of opening under COVID and continuing to move that forward, and what will be ever-changing dynamics around the pandemic and how it's changing and how we have to adapt. I just don't want to create a false sense that we're going to be able to be all in on the 6 or 7 different topics that may spin out of this, because it's not realistic.
And I'm remembering our conversation with Sue where we talked about, you know, if this grows into something, that it's the community that helps, that makes it grow, and it's not reliant on the school. So I feel like what Patrick said is true, that it doesn't hinge on something happening at the school district. It's really getting our community to grow and be there to do this kind of work. And but that's not to say that the board can't hear from that group, you know, as a focus group, or because that is part of our work, and it could be contained in a regular board meeting where we hear from the group kind of thing. But I'm remembering that conversation with Sue, and you know, we were saying, well, how do we know? You know, do we push it along? And she said, if it goes, it goes, and if it doesn't, that's the sign that, you know, that's not the thing the community wants to work on. So I think we have to remember that it's not our work, it's the community's work.
Okay, and I just have one other question, then I'll be absolutely quiet. Don't make that face, Sally. I saw that. I don't understand why advocacy with the legislature is not a board responsibility. I do feel like the legislature has the most influence, much more influence than individual community members or community groups around legislative matters that affect the school district. And I'm wondering why that isn't a board responsibility and something that the board would be willing to actively and, dare I say, aggressively take on.
So if I could speak to that, when I was chair of the Moncton board, I spoke to our representatives frequently about many things that were going on at the time. The governor was doing some stuff that was hard to comprehend and plan for, and I can't even remember the details now. I blocked it out. So I talked to Ruth Hardy, I talked to Dave, I talked to our state reps at the time. And that was, the board had wanted me to do that to get clarification and to give our perspectives on how things were going. And I had several conversations with several of those, people. Oh, come here, buddy. He's really old. All right, here you go, dude. Why don't you go down? And so there hasn't been anything since I've been on the board that was as coming down from the top, or possibly coming down from the top, as since I've been on the board for the last year. And so I don't think we have said, oh my gosh, we have to talk to someone about this. Plus we have Caleb on the board, and so he does give us information, and more than we used to get, because he's right there in the room. And then he lets us know sort of what that committee is working on, and things like that. So anyway, I mean, if something came up that the board felt like they wanted to talk to someone about, we would certainly do that.
Well, I mean, might they want to be talking about to the legislature about some changes in the way the funding formula works, some changes in the threshold.
Right. Patrick's been doing that ongoing.
And I've been part of those meetings where I'm doing that. And we have Kevin Hansen at the VSBA who's active in that. So it's not like we aren't doing anything. It's just there's only so much as a board with all that long list that Patrick just said of what's going on that we can keep up with it. So if the community can help with that, that helps us in the long run too, because we can only do so much.
And Patrick, you've testified once, right? Was it once or more, or you've testified at least once about these issues?
Yeah, I'm just remembering the one time. But in addition to testifying, which is a more formal means of advocating with the legislature, multiple one-on-one conversations with senators and representatives, but also we're sort of falling into probably a 2 or 3 times a year meeting with regional representatives, with regional legislators, and really having some frank and open conversations about the challenges that are facing school districts and the need for support from the state level, from funding formula conversations to consolidation challenges to sort of everything that is facing our school districts. We haven't had one, actually we did have one fairly recently with all the board chairs and superintendents from really all of Addison County. So that also includes the Slate Valley as well as Rutland Northeast in terms of school districts. And it was productive. I think, again, a lot of varying opinions, but a lot of different methods for advocacy with the legislature in formal and less formal ways. And there's always room for more.
I know that Ruth Hardy was interested in attending our gathering and she was unable to, but she did follow up after she had seen the notes and the action spreadsheet and said she would be happy to talk with any group that was interested in that piece about what's coming through the pipeline, you know, kind of the general scope of where things were. And so I encouraged her to put her name on the list so that she would be in the loop with any gatherings that happened. I don't know if she's done that yet, but even if she didn't, I think as a citizenry, I mean, I think as a school board, yes, and as our admin team, yes, but also as a full, you know, as all of the citizens of our community, we can definitely, we should be regularly asking for more info on these issues and advocating for what we think our schools need. So.
And I think from my perspective, you know, so if I imagine how this could play out, so I know Ruth fairly well, and we have a lot of really good conversations. And I try to, you know, put things into context. And she was a board member for a long time and had kids go through school systems, so I think she gets it from the community perspective. But if she was hearing from many community members of the 5 towns about a particular issue that was causing concerns for our community, related to the school or not, if it was related to the school, as she started hearing more and more about this and she felt like she was lacking information or needed something, I have absolutely no question that she would reach out to me and say, hey, I'm hearing this from a lot of people. What's going on with that? Can we talk more about it? So to me, that's an option in terms of a way that a group of community members could help advocate with the legislature that eventually gets me involved, but there's sort of a grassroots component to it that is, I think, as the system's designed, having community members have those conversations directly with their representatives who then bring that information through the channels they need to become informed and advocate at the state level. I think that mechanism is something we can rally people around. I think it's effective. I think it's the way the system was designed best. I don't think most of us are going to get much opportunity to testify in the legislature. It's going to be through these other channels that we're going to be able to advocate, probably.
I think since we started chatting, Kim joined us. Hi, Kim.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'm eating my dinner. I was running late, so
I'm not going to make you watch me eat my meal, so I'm listening in.
No problem. So just to bring you up to speed, we did a recap of the roundtable and kind of came back to a couple pieces on that. Shared some information about the work of the community action team. And if everybody's good to move to the next item, which is to talk about our community engagement plan for the fall, I'd like to do that. My hope is that we can, so at our last call, we got some good feedback on that plan. That feedback and conversations with the back to school planning team and conversations with Patrick and Don and Kevin and Sue have helped to shape the plan a little bit more. And so it's been changed since you may have last seen it at our last meeting. So I was hoping we could walk through that amended plan, and I'd love to get any additional feedback that you might have. The next step is for it to go to the board. We have a retreat next Wednesday, which I won't be attending, but I've asked Rob if he would be willing, as a member of this committee, to convey the details of the plan to the full board. And unless he's changed his mind, I think he said yes, he would do that. So, so we'd like to just kind of share, here's what we're thinking, and run it by the full board so we can get underway. So I'm happy. Is it, I guess, nod or wave or put your thumb up if you'd like me to share my screen with the plan, if that's the easiest way for you to see it. Otherwise, I'll just assume everybody can access it. Yes? Okay, so I will share my screen. So give me a minute to do that. And let me get okay, so can you guys see this? Yep, okay. Okay, so I'm just gonna walk through and then I'll pause and get your reactions. So again, the purpose of our work this fall is bringing people back together. I think that's already happening with the community action team back to school planning, but it'll be, ongoing throughout the fall and whatever the school year looks like. We also want to take the time to inform and educate the community about the challenges that we face financially and with respect to our facilities planning process. They're two separate things, but they're very connected. We'd like to get a baseline of how the community is feeling about how things are going, and this could be specifically related to back to school, or which probably seems like it would make the most sense, but when we initially wrote that, it was sort of how do people think things are going in the district overall. We'd like to revisit and reaffirm the core educational values that we came up with as a community last fall, and use that to help us solicit input on decisions about the budget for 21-22 and the facilities plan. So there are some considerations that we want to keep in mind. We want to make sure that we are thinking about how to connect community input with decision making where possible. So really understanding what places that within these decisions the community might have a voice in. We want to make sure we design really well-crafted surveys. So when we're asking for input, thinking about the questions we ask and the kind of information we want to get back. We want to think about a really well-designed marketing and communication plan that encompasses lots of different media. And we want to make sure we're doing this in concert with other communication that's going out from the district. We want to make sure we ask demographic questions so we get a sense of our responses, keeping in mind that we always want to reach out to as broad a spectrum of community members as we can. And another consideration is to offer visuals, timeframes, something that helps people get a sense of this work as part of a context or a bigger picture. So there's some questions I think that this plan brings up for Patrick, for the board, for his admin team. One is, where are there opportunities for the community to connect with decision making? You know, there's lots of decisions that happen around everything that we do in our schools that are not necessarily the work of the community to decide. But if we're asking for input from folks, it would be good to identify what places we might be able to use that input to inform decisions we make and to let the community know what those are. And also whether there are opportunities for creative problem-solving strategies as we move forward. This is a big one, and I think it's one that people are talking a lot about right now, that this moment in time is an opportunity for lots of innovation and creative thinking, which is really exciting. And also, I think I'm imagining if you are leading an organization like the school system, it's also probably really daunting to imagine how to do anything other than just meet the needs to get kids back in school this fall, which is a huge lift. So it would be good to be able to clarify and understand better, are there opportunities for creative problem solving as we think about moving forward? So our timeline, it shifted a little bit because the back to school date, I think probably everybody's aware now, is now September 8th. So, and things are going to possibly keep changing, but for right now, that's the date that kids are going to be back in school, but I believe staff will be coming back around the time that they were originally going to be doing their in-service, and that gives more time for preparation and for thinking about how to get ready for students. So we're already into August. We're starting to report back on the roundtable, so that's the kind of our first next step. And then we'll be presenting this plan to the full board at the retreat. So the next big thing to kind of share with folks is the Nasdaq study, and just checking in, Patrick, if that's still something that we'll be getting information back on very soon, or if that timeline shifted at all.
No, the timeline hasn't really shifted. I have a draft of that document, of their report, and it says all over it, not for public distribution at this time. So I have a meeting with Nasdaq on Thursday, and that might be the reason why it says not for public distribution, because they want to have an opportunity to talk it through, see if there are any errors, kind of make sure it's had at least one kind of pass through with the school district before it's ready for distribution. So that's what I think is true, and that's what I hope is true. But I should know more after Thursday, and then we can get that out in to the board and to the facilities group and possibly this group, just for people to start seeing. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be intentionally distributed broadly until the board's had a chance to talk about it at the retreat. Hopefully we can have a plan after the retreat on exactly how widely and in what format, with what accompanying documents. I want to send that out more broadly.
So I wonder if we should, at the next meeting of this group, maybe is when we talk about that information and how best to share it out with the community. And I guess maybe the board will have more to, we'll have seen it and thought about that as well. For now, I've put it in September, also because, this is, the focus here is really sharing with the broader community, and folks' capacity to think about much else besides getting back to school is pretty limited until school is underway. So, so I think even if the report's ready, it might not be the best time to send it out anyway. Kristen, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I have the timeline for the facilities planning timeline. It says August, board reviews, study, and develops plan to share information with community. September to October, board and community discuss.
Yeah.
And then
Okay,
November
that's great.
24th, board to decide what to put before voters for action. Then December 15th, board to approve warning for vote, if there's going to be a vote. Then January 21st to 30th, is the window for warning a vote. So that was all to get the ducks in a row.
Kristen, what is that? Is that from a?
That's from the draft MAUSD facilities planning timeline that we had on the community that we had out in the packets.
Last
and I
fall.
think that's what we sort of were aiming at. So it seems like we're on track. But again, the window for warning a vote is January 21st. So we need to keep going with the rest of that. So we're right on sort of reviewing the study and developing a plan to share with the community in August. And then board and community discuss it September and October. I can't put it up, but here it is. It's on my, I took a picture of it and it's on my phone. So, it seems like we're on track, I think.
I'm going to just make a note, add link to fall facilities planning timeline, fall 2019 facilities planning timeline, because those are good reminders and help us to know if we're on track, if there's any adjustments that need to be made. So working backwards from there. Okay, so that has us, sharing back out. And I think we're going to have a lot of conversation probably, or there will be a lot of conversation to be had in this group and at the board, full board level about, what is that communication going to look like? So right now it's just one bullet, but to be fleshed out more. And then in early October, we'd like to reach out to the community to get some feedback. And so thinking about what that feedback might look like, it's, this group's primary goal is to get feedback that would help us inform future decisions around the budget and facilities. But it might also be helpful for the district to get feedback at the same time, more qualitative feedback, to get a sense of how people are feeling about the back to school plan. And so those are some possible questions to ask that might bring those two goals together. Again, just thinking about how best to coordinate communication so that if we are surveying folks, it's valuable and timely and not too much surveying. And you'll see that that first survey is really for families because of the sort of back to school time frame. So we might want to have two surveys, one that's for families, one that's for the full community, because the values question might, or how the school plan's working may not apply, but the, what are our educational values and how would you prioritize them now does apply to everybody. So we're sort of laying the groundwork to get a sense of kind of a baseline. How are people feeling about how things are going and our educational values and what their priorities are. And then mid to end of October, we would look to do more in-person or virtual engagement. I think the town hall meeting will be a great experiment to see how that goes. The school community roundtable was a great experiment. So I think we've seen that Zoom can really be a great vehicle for bringing a lot of people together if it's well facilitated. And considering COVID, that's probably going to be our best opportunity to engage people, but the value of having opportunities for people to reflect, to hear information about what's going on financially, but also to reflect is kind of the priority for this time frame. And then this leads up to early November, where we ideally will have shared information with enough folks that we feel we can then ask people to reflect on based on what we know about our challenges and based on what we know about our values. What are your budget priorities, and whether there are any other questions we want to ask related to facilities or any other questions like that, I think are kind of to be determined. But capitalizing on that early November, even though people will be probably many people voting in by mail, there's still this option to get feedback from the community in a way that might be more prone to getting more results than other times. And possibly connecting with town clerks to see, are there other questions that are going to be going out to residents that we could piggyback on? You know, a lot of other groups survey residents around election time. So, you know, just looking for opportunities to partner with communication already going out. So, sorry, I feel like I talked for a while there.
Could I add?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry. I had
one
something
second. I was
to
just going
add.
to say,
Okay.
I feel like I talked for a while there, so I'd love to get people's feedback on this plan. And yeah, go ahead, Kristen. Did I miss something that you wanted to add in?
No, I just wanted to reflect on what we did last year and how it was quite an overwhelming yes vote on the budget and an overwhelming positive feedback about the budget process last year and the amount of communication going out that Patrick put out and the numerous budget presentations giving very specific information. So I feel like we're on a positive note on that anyway. I don't feel like we got negative feedback about that that I was aware of. And so I think we're going in from, like I said, a positive place from last year. And that if we continue that model, or Patrick, if you continue that model of that level of information, I mean, you've already got your methods and your the data that you used. So hopefully that will be easier this year and less work to some degree to fill those in. But I think, you know, we're coming at it from a very positive place. And so, you know, continuing that and then maybe finding other ways to get the information out. But the stakeholders that were feeling like the year before, the process wasn't transparent and wasn't robust enough, you know, no one said that last year. So this is very different, going into it in a very different way this year.
What other reactions do people have? Thoughts, feedback, concerns, questions?
I'd like to ask a little bit about, you know, things like the retreat. And last year, community members were going to everything so that we knew what was going on to do community engagement. But it doesn't really seem like it this year. Like you guys are just doing a board retreat without community members. Is that true? I mean, without community engagement members, which I'm fine with, but I'm just noticing that we're gonna be missing something if we're part of engagement afterwards. I don't know, or maybe we just learned from you what your highlights were. I don't know. I'm noticing that's different this round, and maybe that's fine. But.
And the agenda for that isn't out yet, I don't think, is it, guys? I haven't seen it. But once it comes out, I mean, there's some specific stuff on there that's definitely board work that people can watch. I mean, I think people are invited to come and observe, right? Is that correct?
Oh, we have all those COVID restrictions about space and time, and we're trying to get the board together. So,
yeah,
you know, coming and watching might mean
yeah.
if there's a Zoom option kind of thing. But this really is a time for the board to spend some time and have conversations that we can't have at a regular meeting, at a regular business meeting. You know, it's a time for us to set our work plan for the next year, and a time for us to do some board education work and some, you know, attend to some things that are too big to happen within the confines of a regular board meeting.
That's great. I feel good about that. One thing though is I recall that the last year's retreat was not recorded, right? So no one could really access what went on there. Is that how it usually is? I mean, is it just simply because there were, I mean, last year there was all decisions about facilities and all that. So that seemed important that community engagement people knew. I don't really care if I'm not there with your board meeting if it's not also community engagement things that you would want to know about. So even if it was just a recording, it would be helpful. if maybe something was
I wonder if,
recorded during that type
sorry,
of,
Sally. I wonder if, are you thinking about, so our retreat in the last summer was at Zeno, and
Oh,
then we had a retreat in January, which we did around, specifically around facilities, and we had board and administrators and community engagement members, and
Yeah.
I think both are open to the public. The board retreat, we have a chunk of time that's like policy governance training, and then we have some time to look at the Nasdaq report, and then there's going to be about an hour or so for the community engagement work, kind of report in on this work, and then an hour or so for the facilities committee work. So I think that maybe you're imagining the other retreat. I don't know. Having been at the board admin.
Yeah, we haven't made any facilities decisions in private. We just started the conversation then, which were the scenarios that were presented at all the other things. There wasn't, it was just our first chance to look at it. There weren't any decisions made there.
Right. Yeah.
Just informational.
Yeah. I'm just saying it would be great if, if we're not there, but you're talking about facilities and all that kind of stuff, it would be great if there was at least a recording that the community engagement people could, not miss what went on and what kind of conversation went on. I don't know if that's possible, but just, it doesn't have to be the whole thing, but just so we're, not out of the loop on what's been going on with facilities. And maybe, or not just facilities, but, the whole options and what's going on around schools,
I think, John, maybe you can help me remember, like before COVID, we, anybody could show up that wanted to a retreat, right? We didn't often have people come, but anybody could come unless we're in executive session, because we're a quorum, so it has to be an open meeting. Right. So if that's not the case, how do you propose we ensure that it's still an open meeting?
Well, it is an open meeting anyway, because the whole board could not sit together. So it is an open meeting. I don't know that, I'm unsure about whether they were planning on having a Zoom option available, because
Gotcha.
this isn't really a time when we're making decisions. It's really a time for us to sit together and discuss topics that we can't do within the regular business meeting. There's just not enough time, or it's sort of a chance for us to talk to each other about the work ahead.
Does that preclude it being an open meeting though?
No. Nope. But we typically don't have.
I'm not saying I want to be there. I don't want to be there. I just would love to hear the results later. I don't have to have input right then, but it would be good for me just to be able to hear about the conversations that go on with everything to do with the scenarios and that end of things. I don't need to know about everything else that you guys are talking about.
Concerned about that link. I mean, there are 6 board members plus myself on this call tonight. So the communication between the discussions at the board retreat and that, being brought back to this group in terms of what's needed for this group to continue its work, I feel like between the minutes from the board meeting, the board retreat, and the fact that almost a quorum of the whole board is on this call tonight, it satisfies any concern I have around that.
Yeah. I think it's coming from the fact that last year when we did the retreat thing that, the facilities and scenarios and all that, there wasn't a recording, and there were things that I wish that were recorded, because it was like, whoa, I missed how that went. And and minutes didn't always cover it. So I don't know. I don't really, it probably doesn't matter, but I just had a feeling to just bring that up, because it just feels like it's like really important stuff that might be going on, and it would be good if there's a recording of that part of it. I don't know.
I totally hear that. I also think there's a value in a public body being able to have a conversation without it being video recorded sometimes too. I think people can behave differently when there's a camera on. So I think oftentimes capturing that information is really important. Rolling the footage isn't necessarily always the best way to capture it.
Yeah. I agree with that. And it's just that this thing that started as a community engagement around this ever since the 5-Down community thing, it just feels like that part of it should continue to have an openness to the community, that part of it, somehow.
Do you think we might, like Kristen perhaps maybe would write something up after the retreat and be willing to share that out? Or is that something we could work on together as a group after, putting together or sharing with the community engagement group after the next meeting we have after the retreat, and putting it into a part of those minutes and sharing it out then?
Well, again, we're not going to make any decisions then. We're just looking at the report that everyone will look at, right? So, because that's part of September and October, which is, as I had on my thing, what did it say? Dun, dun, dun. Board and community discuss. So it's just us looking at it, and then we're going to discuss it with everybody. So I don't think, it's just everybody getting the information just a little bit earlier before the community. Because that's what our timeline says to do. It's not like any decisions are going to be made, or, I mean, I don't even know how much time is given to, what is it? You said an hour. I haven't seen the actual agenda isn't out yet, so I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I was going to ask Patrick or Don if you guys could speak to that part of our agenda. Oh, you're muted still, I think.
Because we're screen sharing right now, I can't see.
Oh, here, let me stop. There you go. Oh, still muted.
All right, spacebar is not working, so I was just in that agenda making the adjustment to add Rob as the person for the fall community engagement section. But right now, as the agenda is set up, we have a couple of hours for training around policy governance and talking about ends and that sort of work. Then half an hour for sort of setting the context for the conversations around NASDAQ and the fall community engagement by looking at some budget projections. Then we'll talk about the NASDAQ study, have some dinner, and then the fall community engagement. And to me, the budget conversation, the NASDAQ conversation, the fall community engagement, in a way, that's really all the same big conversation, just with a few different sections to try and sort of capture the essence of those different components to that work. And then we're going to review next steps, reflect on the meeting process, and that's it. That's 6 hours.
So I think, you know, we're working through the opportunities and challenges of having a joint board community committee. And I think it's hard to figure out how to handle this kind of thing. I think I would be concerned if there was a sense that we were not being transparent in our conversations and discussions. I also recognize that information isn't always ready to be shared with the public at the same time. But I'm concerned that's a slippery slope. I'm not sure how we navigate that. This is really new. As long as I've been on the board, we haven't had a committee that's been a joint community board committee. And, I think we do want to strive for open, transparent communication. So I'm not sure where that leaves us. I think that, as far as the law is concerned, there are very few reasons why we can go into executive session. This is a public body making public decisions. I don't know.
Is there a way to let people know about, I don't know, because of space issues, if we can, how many more people we can have in the room. I think we're meeting in person to support the plan going forward, that teachers and students are going to be in school moving forward. So we feel that that's really important. And we feel like we want to be in a space that mimics what that's going to be like. And so I don't know how much more room there will be, but if there is more room, we could let people know what time we're having that discussion approximately, because we know how these retreats go, that it's approximate, and then invite people to come to that part if there's space. So that's another function of the retreat, is to show what that configuration will look like and meet under those circumstances. So it does complicate having a large amount of people at the meeting, but we feel like that is an important thing for us to do.
I also think it's important to remember that this community engagement subcommittee of the board is not a board in and of itself. Its work is to support decisions the board has to make, but many decisions are still the board's to make, and they have to deliberate over the learnings they've collected through the work of this subcommittee, weigh all that information and think about next steps, and ultimately the board directs this group's work versus the other way around. And I think it's also it's important for the board to be able to focus in on those conversations and kind of dig into that work. And that's what a retreat offers that a regular board meeting doesn't. That, the opportunity, we couldn't spend 3 hours at a regular meeting talking about the Nasdaq study and the fall community engagement work. There isn't time. There's so much other business to take care of as well. So this is really an opportunity for the board to sort of really dig in, and isn't so much, the intent of this is not community engagement. The intent of the retreat is for the board to do board work, not because it's trying to keep anybody out, but because it serves a slightly different purpose than a regular board meeting would, or a community engagement event, or the special retreat that we had, which was a very different, we called it retreat, but it really was very different than what a typical retreat has been. So I want to make sure the board has the opportunity to do those things that is very important for it to do as well.
Yeah, I definitely feel like the board should have that time. Like, that is really rich time. And so, yeah.
Sally, I was just thinking and piggybacking off of Krista, but there is that, if your perception or the community's perception is that as a board we're making these back channel, in a cave decisions that have huge implications on the community, then I think this committee and or the board isn't also operating the way we'd like to, I think, or that's my perception. Perception and reality, we have to remember, most of the time your perception is your reality. And so we'd love that. I personally, as a board member, would love that feedback, Sally. If you're like, well, that retreat, they seem like they didn't have the camera rolling, and all of a sudden now, boom, there's a decision. And if that wasn't the reality, but that's your perception, we've missed a communication channel there somewhere. So I really actually appreciate that, because I think that's feedback for us to build from, not only as our subcommittee, but as the board too. So, thank you.
Yeah, I think that my thinking is that whatever goes on is going to be huge. We know how much there is around what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen, but there is a lot of tension around the possibilities. And so I think that it'll be hard for people not to have some of that feeling. And that was part of why having community members involved all along the way would help that or something. But I think no matter what, it's going to be, it's going to be one of those tough times to make a decision and put it out there and see if people are going to vote on it. So I don't know what can make that really any better. But hopefully we will figure that out in the whole community engagement after whatever goes on at the meeting. Just the way it's presented and all that.
Andrew, I hope you don't mind if I put you on the spot to just ask, but we haven't heard from you yet. If you have any thoughts to add.
To this particular conversation or in general?
Well, either,
to the issue of
I guess.
taping and community ability to see the retreat. Is that what you mean?
Sure, but whatever you'd like to expound on is welcome.
No, I'm just listening along. No, so the issue of like people being available for the retreat. I can hear what Rob's saying. I'm sort of on the fence about it because personally, I hate sitting in a meeting with a videotape running, looking at me. But that's what I'm not photogenic, perhaps. But I do think it is important for us to figure out how to communicate to the community that this isn't any backroom deals. This is just us trying to do the work and have a place for a conversation. But that's all I have to add.
Okay, well, what other, I mean, it sounds like we all feel like there should be a way to communicate what happens there in all the parts of the conversation, that seems really important. And maybe some mixed feelings about how that should happen.
I think the only way to do it is to record it, because you can't record that kind of a conversation in writing unless you just do it verbatim or a transcript. You can't, because it's just people seeing some information for the first time and saying the first thing off the top of their head and processing it like that's what people do, right? And just sharing their thoughts and ideas. I mean, that's what those kind of conversations are about. And it doesn't mean that there's any decisions. It's just people's first, because we're all human and we need to process things and, say a million times this is going to be a really hard process. And that's going to be after we get the budget information. So that's certainly going to inform our feelings and thoughts about everything. But I don't think putting it in writing is going to cover it, how people are wanting to, because what we put on the minutes is discussed the blank report, right? Because you can't, it would be a very bad novel. I don't know what you would call it, but I mean, I don't think anyone wants to sit and watch our 6-hour retreat, right? So, I mean, do we just record that part of it? I mean, I don't know. I mean, we're problem solving this, right? So,
right,
because we
there's
don't
that
want
option.
it to be in
there's
private, right? No,
right.
Believe me, no one
that
wants to see
option.
all
There's
6
invite
hours.
people. There's invite people to that part of the conversation, and then there's minutes after. Sounds like those are the 3 possibilities.
Can I jump in real quick? This is Kim.
Sure.
From my perspective as a community member on this subcommittee of the board, I have a lot of faith in the board members who sit on this committee to accurately reflect the work that the committee has done to the full board. So in my mind, it sounds like the retreat is a place for the subcommittee to report to the board about this work, to talk about the work that's been done, what the plans are, and to answer questions that board members who haven't been involved in this work might have about what the plan is going forward. So it doesn't feel to me like there's this big decision-making machine that gets, you know, fired up at the retreat, that it has more to do with full communication back to the full board. Is that accurate about what the retreat is? Is because that in what I've heard everybody say, that there aren't major decisions that are being made around facilities, around community engagement, that it's more a place for conversation and planning work. So it just doesn't seem like it's a big issue in terms of the community not being represented.
Having never been at one, you described it perfectly, Kim, for discussion and conversation and also education. We often, last year we had a, what was the diversity? Implicit bias training. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that I would be perfectly comfortable in having one person on the board, on this committee, come back and just report out like what the conversation was about, what the general feeling of the board was. I don't know. I feel like the retreat should be a little bit more informal, in a place where people can feel a little more comfortable having conversations that might lead to more creative ideas and energy. And sometimes when it's recorded, it starts to feel more like a business meeting. So that's my feeling.
So it sounds like we've heard, I think, from everybody, and I'd like to talk about what we're going to present at the retreat. And you know, I think, as there are all of the board representatives of this committee are on the call, that we will do our best to share back out with this group the nature of the conversations and what that means for our work going forward, because it will be a big part of this group's job to figure out how to translate all of those conversations into information and input gathering in our community. So yeah, so if we could just take a minute to go back to our plan, unless anybody else has anything to add on that. I'm going to share again. And thank you, Sally, for bringing that up, because I think that's it's just an important thing for us to be regularly talking about. So the hope is for Rob to have what he needs. And of course, Kristen will be there, and Liz, and Don and Patrick, to convey to the full board what this plan is. But as we're looking at it and talking about it, if there's any other concerns or feedback, questions, things that we want to be sure we incorporate into this.
I almost wonder, and Kristen kind of started this conversation earlier, if there are inconsistencies with the earlier timeline created and this timeline, we should be able to speak to those inconsistencies, or potentially change this timeline to reflect the other one.
Yeah. I forgot how to get back to full screen. Am I muted, or can you guys still hear me?
We can hear.
Can hear me. Okay. Rob, I wonder if it would be helpful if I put, and I made a note at the top of the document to put the link to the timeline that we came up with last fall. And then as this group is talking about this plan, to remind folks of what we started with, and that, you know, based on COVID and the back to school planning, you know, we're following a similar trajectory, but there may be some things that have shifted a little bit. Does that kind of cover what you're talking about, Patrick? Because I mean, at least from what, I'm not looking at our original timeline, but from what Kristen said, I think we're still on you know, the end goal is the same. And it's a good reminder for all of us, but that hasn't changed. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that may be a good thing to just check with the board and see, like, and maybe that's something with this committee as well. Is the end goal of our timeline positioning us to be able to put something before the voters on town meeting day still the goal? We don't know what that something is, or if necessarily there will be something, but we want to have a timeline that allows for that if that's what we want to do. And assuming yes, I think we would make the case that this timeline achieves that, even though it might be slightly different in terms of what's happening when from our original. The end goal is still the same.
If I could add from this sheet, it says there's two outcomes. If schools reconfigure with no school closure, August 2021, new school configuration begins. If schools reconfigure with school closures, August 2022, new school configuration begins. If construction needed, June 2022, construction to begin. So that was the end of that sort of timeline, just as informational. If that makes sense.
And that hasn't changed either, right, Patrick? So in other words, if we were to decide something in March 2021, here's how long it would take before these different scenarios could begin. And then therefore, if nothing happens until 2022, then everything moves back a year.
And that was really just to try and account for the various sort of decision points and who has what authority, right? So the school board can determine how schools could be repurposed while keeping them all sort of open in some educational capacity. That timeline can be different versus decisions the community needs to make, which has a sort of a different impact on the timeline. And if we're talking construction, there's a whole other set of events that need to happen leading up to construction and getting construction going that is yet a different sort of impact on the timeline.
I guess I just would say that when you present this plan to the board at its retreat, it'll be important to let them know that you've presented it without having seen the Nasdaq study, and that I'm just finding it quite difficult to comment on this plan without having seen that.
I was also thinking about when we do share information out with the community, that even just this timeline that we just went through and a reminder of the decision-making process or responsibilities are going to be important reminders along with other information we share out to the community. Does anyone have any other oh, sorry, was I just interrupting somebody?
Yeah, sorry. The facilities, the presentation of the report is going to be shared with the facilities subcommittee on August 10th. Isn't that right?
That's
And
the
then your
hope
retreat.
point.
The,
So as of right now, so I just received the document over the weekend. And it's not for public distribution, as per Nasdaq's request. I'm assuming because they want an opportunity to sort of talk it over with school district personnel and make sure there's not some sort of glaring errors or something along those lines. And I have a meeting with Nasdaq on Thursday where I hope to clarify that. So hopefully after Thursday, the documents are ready for public distribution, which means then they can be shared with the facilities study committee, this committee, the school board. Until then, because once a document is shared with a public body for an open meeting, if it isn't shared in executive session, it effectively becomes a public document. So until it's ready for public distribution, it can't really be shared with those committees either for discussion. So I'm hopeful to be able to get that document still to the facilities group before their meeting on Monday, but I won't know for sure until I meet with Nasdaq.
I can't see everybody. I can only see 3 or 4 boxes at one time. I'm going to scroll through. Any other thoughts or comments about this plan that would be helpful to bring forward?
A tidbit. So the documents aren't ready for public distribution, but for the purposes of our conversation around this document and the timeline, so having read the draft report, there's nothing in the Nasdaq study that suggests that our projections on decreasing enrollment, et cetera, these factors that are causing the concern for our financial crunch, there's nothing in the study that suggests that that's not going to happen for us. So obviously there's a lot more information in there about the details behind that. But from a conceptual standpoint, there's nothing that suggests that it's not going to be what we project it's going to be. And they, of course, aren't mentioning anything about spending caps put out by the state of Vermont, and they didn't touch upon that. They were looking at our demographics, our facilities, etc.
Sorry, they didn't touch upon what, Patrick?
Like they didn't weigh in with any information about changes happening at the state level around spending thresholds, that sort of thing. Like there are other factors out there that certainly have an impact that weren't part of the Nasdaq study.
Sure.
It's really about demographics and facilities, and there's no news in there that suggests that we're going to be just fine without making change.
And I gather that what you're seeing, although you've just had a chance to look at it, it looks like a thorough exploration on all the scenarios. Yes?
I have some questions. The way it's structured, it didn't clearly address each scenario. So that's part of my inquiry with them on Thursday, wanting to understand more about how that looks and wanting to just sort of, it'll help me understand the study better by being able to ask some questions of Nasdaq. And assuming we can share these documents, I have Nasdaq on the sort of at the ready to join the facilities committee meeting on Monday. So the committee will have an opportunity to ask questions, and the way that committee has been operating, folks that are in the meeting as attendees have often had an opportunity to pose questions as well. So if everything works out the way I think it will and hope it will, that may be a really sort of fruitful meeting to be able to attend if you're available.
Yeah, Kim, I don't know if you were here when we were kind of talking about that timeline. So, it's going to go to the facilities committee, and then and the board will talk about it at our retreat, which I think is the next day. Our committee doesn't have a meeting again until September 1st. Our next scheduled meeting is actually at the same time as town hall meeting for community members around back to school. And so I'm imagining this group's next gathering, we can spend time, and hopefully by then we will have all had a chance to look at the study. Some of us maybe go to the conversation with the facilities planning group, but that we can really talk about, okay, how do we want to share this? What's the best way to share this with the community?
And that was why I brought up the possibility of it being presented to the facilities subcommittee, because then any of us that want to sit in and hear about that, and then maybe comment on this plan before the next day. I mean, you know, it's a tight turnaround, but if any of us have comments, we could send them to Rob, I guess, since Rob will be doing the work at the retreat, that if we have a chance to see the plan, take a look at the overall sort of strategy for the fall, and then send you any comments that may or may not affect your conversation with other board members.
Yeah. And I think in general, when there's that overlap between some board members and some community members, and we're hearing each other's conversations, that's always helpful. Okay, so we have 9 minutes left. So I just want to do a check-in to see any other thoughts or questions about this plan, about the roundtable, about anything anybody wants to revisit, that, you know, burning questions, comments, or issues before we close.
Just my 2 cents, Kristen, looking at the, you know, this timeline, and you've stated it, just remembering we need to continue to ask people, I think, how they're doing first. I don't think the winner is necessarily going to be possibly the brightest winner that we've experienced in our lifetimes, and before throwing a lot of information and you know, challenging conversation and decision at our stakeholders, owners of us, of our group, that we just check in with people. How's it going? Because at the end of the day, we are neighbors also.
Does anyone else have anything to add?
Well, you know, when Rob just spoke, it reminded me that we've been, you know, going through a lot of crises for months and months. And when it comes around to voting and tax time, and that can also feel like a crisis, you know, for people thinking about money and taxation and all that. Or the idea of facilities and what's going to happen, it might be scary. So it's true that we need to be really not throw another big thing coming right from the community at people. We need to be really, really communicative and kind and listening to people. I think that's really important right now.
I just had a quick question for you, Patrick, if you've heard, I should have asked this at the beginning, but it doesn't seem like we've had a lot of community freak out about the back to school plan. I know it's stressful and concerning for folks, but my limited sense is that it's being digested and people are relatively okay with the way it's been shared and what the plan is going to be. I'm only saying this because I don't know that's the same in some other districts on the other side of the mountain. So I just wondered if my impression was not accurate, what the general vibe is from your perspective.
No, I think you're that's my sense too. I think people are in pretty good shape. You know, we have the 1,000 or so responses to the survey, which indicates, I forget, somewhere in the neighborhood of 86 or 87% of folks planning on sending their kids back within 2 days a week as we're planning. A lot of the questions are more around, I would say the greatest concern is around families that need a place for their children to be 5 days a week so they can go to work. And I've been saying in my communications that we're really working on a supervision / childcare option for families. And that's about the most I've been able to say. In my communication tomorrow, I'll be able to say a little bit more about, we're feeling really optimistic that we're going to be able to have childcare that meets the community and staff need. And there are still some details to work out before we can really share the plan. So hopefully that settles that concern a bit. The sort of irate parent emails I've been getting have been around childcare. And I had one family member tell me, or one parent say, I don't care how many days you're open. I'm sending my kid to your school 5 days a week. So unless you get a restraining order on me, plan on them being there. So I've had a little bit of that, but very little. So hopefully I'm going to be able to address that need anyway. And I think, you know, there is absolutely a heightened level of anxiety, and people feel differently about sending their kids back. But I think, you know, with our plan right now to open in a hybrid, giving the option for families who want to keep their kids home 5 days a week, and if we have a childcare option that meets the needs of families who need to send their kids in 5 days a week, we've kind of hit on everybody's needs, I think, in that plan. So I feel like it's going to be okay. And we're going to have a lot to learn as we reopen and try to kind of work the kinks out so that in the event we can start to bring more students in, we've learned a lot and are feeling comfortable, and we can try to pass that sense of confidence on to the community, who hopefully will then feel okay sending their kids back as well. And the idea that, you know, the numbers in Vermont are as good as they get anywhere in the country right now. So if any place can do this and do it well and keep everyone safe, it's us here. So that's a good feeling as well.
Well, I appreciate the folks here who, you know, a lot of the conversations we have are about ensuring that we communicate well on a lot of levels. So folks do feel some sense of knowing what's going on and maybe some comfort in that. And like you said, Sally, or Rob, the winter's not going to necessarily be great. So we're going to have to keep doing this work. But I appreciate that you keep showing up to do it with us. So thank you.
Yeah, I just want to make sure you knew that I wasn't talking about the coming back to school as being a big thing. I was more talking about the facilities conversation and putting something out. So I totally, the people are fine about what's going on now with the school plan and all that. I just wanted to make sure you knew that that's not what I meant. I meant that.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. I meant like what they might want to face, you know, as far as, you know, facilities.
Yeah. Okay, well, if there are no other comments, then I think we will close. If I could get a motion from a board member to adjourn, that would be great. And thank you, Liz, for taking minutes, and for everybody for coming this evening.
Rob, so moved. Close.
Great.
I second.
And a second from Andrew. Okay, all those in favor of adjourning the meeting at 8:59, please say aye.
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 Okay. All right, well, thank you, everybody. So again, no meeting in 2 weeks. If you're able to come to the community town hall, that would be great. There should be information coming out about it soon, but it's on the 18th at 6:30, I believe. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Talk soon.
Thanks, Krista.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.